So we're right after Matan Torah. We received the Torah, and the Torah trains us and teaches us the way of life. And amazingly, the first law that we have in this week's Parsha, right after Matan Torah, we have Kisikne Eved Ivri. So we have all about all the laws of damages, of stealing from another person, of damaging property, of all the intrapersonal laws are really in this week's Parsha. And the first one is the Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri, how does a Jew become an Eved, a slave? So things worked very differently in Torah law than in the law that we have today. Meaning to say, if you take somebody's money today and you don't have money to pay back, so what do? So we all know you file a bankruptcy or Chapter 11 or whatever it may be, and you're off the hook. A worst case scenario, you'll spend a little bit of time behind bars, and after a while you're out and you don't have to pay the money. But in Jewish law, there is no such thing as bankruptcy. Believe it or not, it doesn't exist. A person takes money, he's got to give it back. Even glima, even just the coat on his back says he's got to give it back. What happens if a person doesn't have that money? Well, in Jewish law, there's no such thing as jail. We don't keep people in jail. If you think about the jail system, it doesn't really make sense from a Jewish perspective. First of all, we value time so much, but besides valuing time, we have a different issue. We have the issue of this person will go into jail, so he came in as an amateur thief, and now he'll walk out as a mature, a person that understands the system, that understands how to cheat the system. And that's the person that's going to come out. Who is he amongst? He's amongst the worst criminals sometimes. And therefore, the concept of jail doesn't exist. But what do? So we take this guy and we say, we're going to train him how to be a good citizen in society. And we sell him for an Eved Ivri. He's now a Jewish slave. And when he's a Jewish slave, who's the one that buys a slave? Many times the one who's going to buy a slave, it says, Kona Eved, Kona Rabbi. If he buys a slave, what's going to end up happening? He's buying actually a boss. Because if he has only one pillow, the halacha is he's got to give it to the Eved. He's got to give it to the slave. So there's all kinds of laws of how to act with a slave. And therefore, the only ones that are really going to purchase the slave is someone that cares about other Jews and is willing to train them in the proper way. What do we do with this slave? What we do with this slave is we give him the Adon. It says he could give him a Shivcha Kananis. Shivcha Kananis is a maidservant, a non-Jewish maidservant. And this individual begins to build a family. And after he builds a family, after 6 years, what happens to the Jewish slave? He goes out free. What happens to the children and the wife? They stay. In a sense, we rip apart the family. The family now is going to come apart. This Jewish slave is losing his family. The Ralbag asks, why is it so necessary? Why is this the item that takes place? This Ebed, he comes in, he builds a family, and all of a sudden, after 6 years, he loses the family. Very, very painful. Very, very hard. So he says, he brings down a Gemara. The Gemara says that there are 3 things that a person has a natural charm to. A person loves. What are these 3 things? Chen Adam al Yoshvav. A person enjoys his dwelling place, the place where he lives. He loves. Chen isha al bala. A woman is very beloved by her husband. Her husband looks at her and he says, wow, she's beautiful. She has a certain charm for him. He loves her. And chen mekach alekhoy. And anything that a person purchases, that's something that he loves. He loves. He feels like he got a good deal. He feels like he got a good purchase. He loves it. Now, you take each item. Chen odom al yoshva. A person likes the place that he lives. You see that all the time. You ask a person from Brooklyn, how do you like it? He loves Brooklyn. You ask a guy from LA who's visiting Brooklyn for a number of days, he's going crazy. He doesn't know how people live here, right? But a Brooklyn guy, he loves it. He loves Brooklyn's garbage. He loves the honking. He loves the no parking. He loves it. It's great. There's constantly something happening here, right? Ask the guy from LA, he loves LA. You bring a New Yorker to LA, it's too quiet, right? There's a green light, nobody's honking. The guy's still standing there, right? There's no double parking. What kind of city is that, right? It's why? Chen odom al yoshva. A person loves where he lives. It's very interesting. Somebody was telling me that in Haifa, in Eretz Yisrael, somehow, I'm not sure why, but with the wiring and with the electricity that is exposed over there, people are prone to cancer. And it's known. And yet, people love it. People who are from Haifa, they're there. They're not good. They wouldn't move. Right? You have the same thing as Sderot. You have rockets falling in Sderot. I'm not talking about people who economically can't afford it, but they love Sderot. So that's the thing. Where a person lives is where he loves. It's where he loves. You have the same thing. Chen isha al bala. The Gemara tells us that a person loves his wife and he sees her as very, very charming. How do we know? Because we know by the wedding, what do we sing? Kala no b'chasuda. This Kala is beautiful, right? She's beautiful. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? What if she's not so beautiful? Then you're lying. The Gemara says, no, if this guy married her, that means to him, she looks beautiful. She looks beautiful. And the Gemara finishes off that chen mekach alokchoy, that a person loves something that he bought, and therefore, if let's say a person buys a tie, and he asks you, how is it? How does it look? You can never tell him, are you kidding me? How do you wear such a thing? You can't tell him that. Halachically, you can't tell him that, right? Sometimes your wife comes over, how do I look? Am I overweight? You could never say yes, right? You can never say yes, right? How does this fit on me? So you got to be very, very careful. You got to be very careful. Why? Halachically, a person that buys something, the Gemara tells us, he or she loves it. And therefore you have to know, even if you want to give real feedback, you have to know how to do it. You have to be very careful in the way you're doing it. So the Gemara says the Ralbag, that this is the idea over here. The idea over here is that you have this individual that takes something that doesn't belong to him. Meaning to say, this item, the person could have saved thousands of dollars for this item. You take a diamond ring from a lady, she could have saved a lot of money. Or the husband could have saved a lot of money to purchase it. And now you take it away, you're taking the chen. You're taking that beauty, that charm from the individual. Being that you're taking that chen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that it's not enough to train the individual. It's not enough to go ahead and tell the person what he's doing wrong. No, that's not enough. A person has to live it. Emotionally, the person has to go through this concept of having something that he loves, having a wife that he loves as a slave, and then being torn apart. Hosea Anobi, he was a prophet. And Hosea Anobi would get nevuas, would get prophecies from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And one time HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, go marry this immodest woman. That's a pretty, look, he's a Navi. He's a holy person. That's not what he's looking for, right? And Hoshea Hanavi doesn't really understand the Nevuah, but this is what God tells him. But we know that there's another Nevuah that he gets. And the second Nevuah he gets is he gets a Nevuah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, Bonai chot'u, my children have sinned, and I don't know what to do with them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him this Nevuah. And Hoshea listens to the Nevuah, and he tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know what? Why don't you make a recall? Make a recall. Instead of them, take a different nation, start up from a different nation. You're right, they're a lot of trouble. It's not easy, the Jewish nation. They're stubborn. We talk to them, we tell them, we prophesize. We tell them what you want, and they still don't do it. So it's very, very difficult. Change them. Time to change them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Zokain, you old man. Meaning to say almost in a derogatory way. He says to him, I want you to divorce this woman that you got married to. And Hoshea says, why? Now I should divorce her? I developed feelings for her. You told me to marry her to begin with. I wasn't so thrilled, but now I developed a connection with her. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, so what's bothering you? He says, I have children from her. I built an entire life. God turns to Hoshea and he says, Hoshea, but she was an immodest woman. You don't even know if those children are yours. They may not even be yours. And you still want to stick it out. You still care. You still feel like your life is being torn apart. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, my nation that their forefathers have sacrificed so much and have passed so many tests for me to consider them my own nation. I'm completely intertwined with this nation. I invested so much in this nation. I gave them the 10 makas to make sure that they're out of Mitzrayim. I split the sea. I sustained this nation for 40 years. This is my nation. This is my baby. And you want me to just give them up like this? The only way Hoshea could have understood HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only by literally living through what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is living through. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to marry this lady, to feel what he feels, to feel what it means to be completely connected. And then to be told to divorce this lady, to let her go. There was an interesting, a powerful story with a German emperor, Emil William. And this German emperor goes to check out on his army. And when he goes to check out on his army, the opposing army all of a sudden corners his army. And he realizes that he's in deep, deep trouble. And he quickly just runs to wherever his feet could carry him. And he runs and he sees a small little hut. And this small little hut, he knocks on the door, and a Jew opens up, and the Jew's name is Moshe der Schuster. That's the Jew's name. Moshe der Schuster. And this Moshe, he says, what are you doing here? He says, I'm the emperor. I'm a German emperor. I need your help. If you help me out, I promise you that one day you're going to need me and I will help you out. I'll get you out of there. Fine. So he decides, you know what, I'm gonna help this emperor out. So he hides this emperor. He has like a stack of hay. He puts him in there, hides him over there, and he goes back home. And the army heard that this emperor is around. So they begin to search every single home. And they come to this Moshe's home. And did you see it? Did you see the emperor? No. But they're not taking no for an answer. So they search. They search the home. They search the area around. And they go to that haystack. And they have, at the end of their their guns, they have these spears, and they're sticking it. They're sticking it all over the place. And they see there's nobody there. They want to stick it around to make sure that there's nobody alive over there. Fine. They don't end up stabbing him. I guess he's in between. They don't end up stabbing him. And they leave. This Moshe goes to that haystack, and he takes out the emperor, and he says, they're gone. He says, you sure? Yeah, they're gone. He says, listen to me. If you ever need anything, come to me. I will take care of it. You won't have a problem. Just remember, I owe you a big favor. 2 years later, this Moshe remembers, the emperor owes me a favor. He owes me a favor. I can use a favor. So he goes down to this emperor, and of course, the emperor gives him tremendous amount of honor, tremendous amount of kavod. And the emperor tells him, no, so what do you want? He says, I have to tell you that there's one thing that's been bothering me for a very long time. He says, what is it? He says, when you were there and they were sticking this thing into the haystack, and they stuck it on your right and on your left, and they missed you, and you knew that the next one could have been inside your heart. How did you feel? And the emperor turns red, and he gets upset, and he says, that's a very insulting question. How dare you ask me something like that? And he says, you know what? I'm ordering you now to get out, and my people are going to go and hang you. And this guy turns white. A moment ago, he was offered all this honor. And now he's being wheeled to the town square, and they're going to hang him in front of everybody. And they put the noose around him, and they put the chair under him. And a moment before they're ready to kill him, the emperor walks in, and he says, let him go. Let him go. And he comes to this Moshe, and he tells this Moshe, this is exactly how I felt when I was in this haystack. If I would have told to you in words, you would never have understood. This guy is half dead from the fear, but now he understands exactly what the emperor was talking about. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells this Eved Ivri, you took something from someone else that he worked hard for. That something else was beloved to him. And therefore, the only way for you to really understand what it means to take something away from somebody else is you have to live through it. You have to live through that emotional buildup. So we're going to now take you as a slave. We're going to give you a wife. You're going to have children. And after 6 years, you're going to have to let all that go. And at that moment, you will understand what you have done to your friend. Because up to that moment, there's no real understanding. We could explain it, but you'll never understand it. Person has to realize that what is the first thing, it's very interesting, what's the first thing they teach in yeshiva? Right? They could teach about brachas, they could teach about anything. Gemara, what's the first Gemara they teach? They teach Baba Kama, Baba Metzia. Why? Because it has to do with Nizakin. Nizakin means it has to do with intrapersonal laws. It has to do with understanding that the property of your friend is very, very valuable. That's the basic of Judaism. That's the step one. If you don't have that step one, you haven't started. You haven't started. Understanding that another person's property is extremely valuable in God's eyes, and of course in the individual's eyes, and therefore you cannot touch it. He worked for it. He loves it. And that's the reason, that's the first thing that we start with. Rav Moshe Feinstein was very upset when yeshivas would start with Masechtas Brachas. He said, no, this is the first thing that we should train a child in Gemara. The first thing. In fact, he used to say, Brachas has to do with davening. What happens if you will see his father coming in late? Automatically, boom. Or you see his father talking during shul. So he's learning about Masechtas Brachas. He's learning about what you're supposed to do. He comes to shul with the father, and he's getting literally the wrong message, right? So he says, no, that shouldn't be the first thing you start with. He says, start with the intrapersonal laws. Start with valuing what another person's property is. That is the most powerful and basic tenet of Yiddishkeit. And therefore, Mishpatim, as we're starting right after Matan Torah, that's the first thing we go to. Know that another person's property is extremely precious to him. He loves it. Don't tamper with it. Treat it like your own. Thank you for listening, and I wish everyone a good Shabbos.